Hi everyone, my name is Vishal Singh and I'll be teaching you chess today. So in the previous class, we had completed the movement of pawn and we started with creating an attack with the pawn. So we will be continuing that today and we'll finish that today, and if we have time, we'll also begin with the Passant rule that I talked about in the previous class. So that is actually very important. I hope that we do complete that today. All right, so let's start with the class. I'll be sharing my screen now. Okay, so we completed this in the previous class and the answer was to capture this. Why? Because uh, you do have the support of a knight even if the enemy knight tries to capture your pawn, and even if something was to happen to this knight as well, your queen is still there, so you have two layers of protection over here. Got it? Quite simple. Moving on to the next one. Okay, so now here you're playing as black. Okay, you are playing as black, and your knight is being threatened right now. So what can you do in order to attack using your pawn, right? This is a class about creating an attack with the pawn. So the bishop is the closest enemy piece to your pawns, right? So the basic answer is, since the pawn can only attack diagonally, do you think moving this pawn at b7 to b6 would do anything? No, right? It wouldn't help at all. So since the pawn can attack diagonally, you cannot move this pawn. Why? Because the pawns cannot jump over the pieces and it cannot move ahead if there is something blocking its path. So the only pawn left as an option would be the pawn at a7. So the answer is pawn to a6 in order to attack the enemy bishop. Got it? Quite simple. All right. Moving on to the next one. Now again the same rule applies here. You're playing as black and the queen is trying to attack you, trying to get into your territory. So what you can do is again attack using a pawn. The same method applies. So the answer is pawn to g6. Got it? Quite simple. And the queen cannot capture your pawn here at e5 because your knight is protecting that. So don't worry about it. Okay, moving on to the next. Okay. So now you again pause the video, look carefully. Again, I've been giving out the answers again. I forgot. I'm so sorry. Please pause the video after I show you the puzzle. Immediately pause the video. Think what you will be doing, and then come play the video and see if our answers are matching. You'll understand if you're growing, if your thinking process has started to match more as how it should be in the chess game, right? So again, here you have to create an attack using your pawn. So there are two options. You can either attack this pawn here at e4, or you can attack the rook. Three options actually, not just two. So you can attack the pawn here at e4, you can attack the rook here at b4, or you can attack the pawn here at b5. So what would you go for? If you were to if you were to attack, the pawn at e4 by moving your pawn to f3, and you eventually did manage to capture this pawn at e4, what then? It is being protected by the knight and the rook at the same time, so that would not be a good move. Okay, so let's cross that out. Moving on to the next one. Suppose you were to play your pawn to c4 and you try to attack this, but it is still being protected by the pawn. On the other hand, it can in return capture your pawn. So, and you can either capture that by your knight or your pawn. So that would just be an equal exchange. It wouldn't actually, you wouldn't gain anything or you wouldn't lose anything out of it. So that is a decent option. We can still not consider that. So what would be the best option? The best option would be to attack the rook. Why? The rook is again, remember the point system I told you, it is very important. The rook is worth 5 points. Your pawn is only worth 1 point. So even if the exchange does happen, and to be honest, the rook isn't protected here. So it's even better. Why not go for it? Since the rook cannot attack diagonally, even your pawn is not protected over here, but the rook cannot attack diagonally. So it's all right to attack the rook using your pawn. Got it? Really simple. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. Okay. Now, again, look carefully. What are the closest pieces to your pawns? You're playing as white over here. Okay. So the closest piece to your pawns would be the knight and these pawns. But you can try to attack this, but that would again be an equal exchange because your queen would try capture the enemy pawn. So that would be an equal exchange. No loss, no gain. Wouldn't quite help a lot. And even if you were to move these 2 pawns 2 blocks at a time, you still wouldn't be attacking anything. And if you were to move these 2 pawns, you would still be attacking nothing. Even if you move this pawn, you would still be attacking nothing. But if you move this pawn only 1 block ahead at f3, pawn to f3, you will be attacking the enemy knight. Now again, the knight is worth 3 points. Your pawn is only worth 1 point. This would be a nice move to play. Okay, so this is the correct answer for this one. Moving on to the next one. Okay, so the answer. Please pause the video and then come back again. So as you can see, you over here you have to push you're playing as white again, so you can directly play your move. Very simple. Pawn to d4. So you are attacking the enemy bishop, but simultaneously you are making your own chain, the chain of your pawn, stronger. Right now these are connected, so now if you look carefully, you have all of these boxes under your attack range. This might not look a lot, but actually none of the enemy pieces can actually come into these areas. Got it? It's very simple. Okay. Now moving on to the next one. All right. Now you're playing as black here. Suppose if I were to, you cannot attack anything, right? Look carefully. You can actually attack, but if you were to, play this pawn at a4, you will be losing a pawn, nothing to gain or to lose. If you were to play this 1 block ahead, nothing actually would happen. It would just be a plain move. You cannot kill this pawn. Why? Because this is being protected by the enemy rook. You cannot. You can try to attack this pawn, but you will be captured in return. So no good again. Moving this 2 blocks ahead would do no good. Moving this ahead would do no good. Absolutely. But suppose the white plays pawn to c4. What would be your next move? Pause the video, think, and come back again, please. Because this is actually quite an interesting concept. Okay, so let me explain what an n passant is. I'm giving you a short, brief explanation. We'll be learning more about the n passant in the next video. Got it? Okay. So the n passant is basically, suppose your pawn is here on the second rank, and as I told you, if it has not moved even once, it can sprint 2 blocks. But even though the pawn has sprinted, it has still moved through the third rank, hasn't it? It has moved, right? So if the pawn has just moved, sprinted 2 blocks, and the enemy pawn is at the fourth rank, it can actually still capture it. It is something like you captured it in its way, but you have to do it immediately. So see, now the system is allowing me to actually move diagonally, even though there is nothing here to capture. I can still move diagonally using my pawn, whereas I'm not being given the option over here at all through this pawn at g6, right? So why am I being here why am I given this option over here? Because this pawn at c2 has just moved 2 blocks ahead, has sprinted, and I can still capture it in its way. Really simple. See, I was able to capture the enemy pawn. So this is what basically n passant is. If you're playing as white, if you're playing as white, sorry, if you're playing as black, and the white pawn has just printed, has just moved 2 blocks ahead, you can capture it in its midway. But given that your pawn should be at the 4th rank also. Got it? Okay. So that was all for today's classes. We learned how to create an attack using a pawn. We're done with that. So I'll be teaching you about n passant in the next class. So this was a very short explanation that I gave you. I'll be teaching that briefly in the next class. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll also at the after I'm done teaching with the n passant, I'll also be teaching you how to create a check. I've taught you how to get out of a check. Remember CPR, capture, protect, and run. I taught you that in the previous class. So now this time I'll be teaching you how to give a check, create a check. So that would be quite interesting. Okay, so that was all for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Have a nice day. Bye bye.